The survey ship had been in deep space for more than 6 months. Its mission was simple on paper, but hard in reality. It was sent to map empty regions beyond known human colonies, where almost no one bothered to go anymore. Most believed nothing important was left out there. Just dark space, dead stars, and old debris drifting without meaning. The crew had fallen into a quiet routine. Every day looked almost the same. Sensors checked empty space. Navigation systems adjusted the course slightly. Reports were sent back to command. And every day, the answer was the same. Nothing unusual found. That is why no one reacted at first when a weak signal appeared on the long-range scanner. It was small, almost ignored by the system as background noise. But one of the engineers noticed it while reviewing the data logs. The signal did not match any known natural pattern. It also did not match any active ship or station in the Galactic registry. At first, they thought it was a mistake in the sensor calibration. That was common in deep space. Old systems sometimes picked up false readings from radiation bursts or gravitational shifts. Still, the engineer marked it for a second check. When the data was processed again, the signal was still there, slightly stronger this time, as if the ship had moved closer without knowing it. The captain was called to the bridge. A quiet tension spread through the crew. There was nothing dramatic yet, but experience had taught them that space rarely gave false warnings without reason. The object was still far away, just beyond the edge of clear detection. The scanners tried to enhance the image. At first, it looked like a small asteroid drifting near a dead star. That would have been normal. Broken rocks from ancient collisions were everywhere in this region, but something about its shape felt wrong. It was too structured, too balanced. Natural objects did not form smooth lines and repeating angles, but this one did. The ship adjusted its position slightly, and the scanners improved the resolution again. Slowly, the object stopped looking like a rock. It looked artificial. No one spoke for a moment. The silence on the bridge became heavier. The navigation officer ran a quick database check. No known structure existed in that sector. No mining station. No abandoned colony. Nothing. Yet the object remained on screen, steady and unmoving. The captain made a decision. They would move closer, but carefully. No sudden approach. No active signals. Just passive observation. As the ship moved forward, the object slowly revealed more detail. It was massive, far larger than any civilian vessel, and even larger than most military cruisers in active service. Its outer surface reflected no clear energy signature, but its form was unmistakably engineered. Long, layered sections stretched across its body like armor plates. Some parts were broken. Others still held structure, as if something had protected them from complete decay. The most disturbing part was how silent it was. No power readings, no movement, no communication signals. Just dead metal drifting through space. Still, it did not feel empty. There was a strange sense that it had once been alive with purpose. The science officer began scanning for material composition. The results made no sense at first. The alloy mixture did not match any known civilization, human or alien. It was older than anything recorded in the current galactic databases. Then came another strange reading. Buried under layers of decay were markings. Not random scratches, but structured symbols. Some of them resembled early human language patterns, but far older and more complex than any known historical record. That detail changed everything. Humanity had no known civilization capable of building something like this at such an ancient time. The captain ordered full caution protocols. The crew grew quiet again, each person realizing the same thought forming in their minds. This was not just debris. It was something that should not exist. And yet, it was right in front of them, waiting in the dark silence of space. The ship moved closer with slow and careful steps, as if it did not want to disturb anything around it. Every system on board was now focused on the strange object ahead. What looked like a drifting rock just an hour ago had now become something far more complex and disturbing. The crew could see its true shape clearly now. It was not an asteroid. It was a warship, a massive one. Its structure stretched far wider than any known vessel in active service. Even the largest modern carriers looked small in comparison. The outer hull was layered in thick plates, some cracked and broken, others still intact, as if they had survived something extreme long ago. The ship gave no signal. No heat, no power, nothing. It was completely silent. That silence was what made it feel wrong. Space was usually full of noise when viewed through instruments, background radiation, energy shifts, distant star activity. But this object seemed to absorb everything around it, like it was cutting itself off from the universe. The captain ordered a full scan at maximum resolution. What came back confused the science team even more. The materials were not just unknown. They were inconsistent. Different layers of the hull were made from alloys that should not exist in the same time period. Some parts looked extremely advanced, while others seemed almost primitive but heavily reinforced. It was as if the ship had been repaired or rebuilt many times across different ages. Then came the markings. They were everywhere along the hull once the closer images were enhanced. Lines, symbols, and patterns stretched across the surface in a structured way. They were not random damage or alien art. They were intentional. The linguistics officer studied them carefully. At first glance, they did not match any modern language used in the galaxy. But after hours of comparison, something unexpected came forward. Some of the symbols had a distant relation to early human communication systems. Very early. So early that they were believed to be simple tribal markings from prehistoric Earth. But this was different. These markings were far more complex, more developed, as if human language had once evolved much earlier than anyone had recorded and then disappeared from history completely. That idea made the bridge fall silent again. If this was truly human-made, then it meant one impossible thing. Humanity had a forgotten past, a past that no one in the current records had ever seen. The captain decided to move closer to the hull for a physical inspection. A small team was prepared to go out in a shuttle. Safety protocols were increased, and all unnecessary systems were shut down to avoid detection by unknown dangers. As the shuttle approached the warship, the scale became even more overwhelming. The surface was not smooth. It carried scars of battle. Deep burns stretched across large sections, frozen in time. Some areas looked melted and then hardened again, as if exposed extreme energy weapons. Other parts showed signs of internal collapse, like the ship had once suffered massive damage, but still managed to stay intact. No one spoke during the final approach. The shuttle gently attached to one of the outer access points. The docking system was not recognized by modern equipment, but surprisingly, it responded. That was another mystery. A system this old should have been completely dead, yet it still reacted. The hatch opened slowly. Inside, everything was dark, not empty, but frozen. The corridors were intact, but covered in dust and long-term decay. Lights that should have been dead flickered faintly, like the ship still had some memory of power deep inside its systems. The crew stepped inside carefully. Their footsteps echoed through long corridors that stretched deeper than expected. The design was unfamiliar, but strangely logical. Everything seemed built for efficiency, movement, and large-scale crew operations. There were signs of life once present here. Control panels lined the walls. Command stations stood in rows. And broken display units still held faint traces of data, like old thoughts trapped inside machines. The science officer began recording everything. Even the air itself felt different. Older, heavy with time. Then they found the first clear confirmation. A large wall panel inside the corridor displayed a faded emblem. It was partially damaged, but the shape was recognizable. It was human in origin, not modern human, not current colonies. Something far older, older than any known record of space travel. The realization hit the team slowly, like a weight pressing down on them. This was not just an unknown warship. This was a piece of human history that should not exist, and it had been floating in silence, completely erased from all known records of the galaxy. The deeper they went inside the warship, the more it felt like stepping into a place that had been frozen in time. Every corridor, every panel, every broken light seemed to hold on to something that once mattered. It was not just metal and machines. It felt like a memory that refused to disappear. The team moved slowly, carefully scanning every section they passed. Their footsteps echoed in the long, narrow passages. The air inside was dry and still, like it had not been disturbed for thousands of years. Even their breathing sounded too loud in that silence. At first, they thought they might only find scraps of old equipment. But then, they reached the central control section. It was larger than anything they had seen so far. Rows of command stations were arranged in a circular pattern. Each station had multiple screens, most of them dark or cracked. Some still showed faint, unreadable symbols that flickered when power was briefly detected in the system. The science officer approached one of the consoles carefully. The moment their scanner made contact, something unexpected happened. A weak pulse of data responded. It was not full activation, just fragments. Like the system was trying to remember how to wake up. The crew immediately began recording everything. Bit by bit, corrupted files started to appear on their portable systems. Most of it was unreadable at first, broken into fragments of code and outdated formats that modern systems struggled to interpret. But after repeated processing, patterns began to emerge. They were logs, captain logs, mission records. The language used was an ancient form of human communication, far older than anything in known galactic archives. It was structured, advanced, and highly developed. That alone changed everything the crew believed about human history. According to accepted records, humanity only became a spacefaring species in a relatively recent era. But these logs suggested something entirely different. Humanity had once been active in deep space long before that timeline. Thousands of years, maybe more. The logs described long-distance exploration fleets, large-scale construction projects, and conflict zones spread across multiple star systems. There were references to outer expansion routes and containment battles, terms no one had seen in modern historical records. The deeper the crew analyzed the data, the more disturbing it became. Entire chapters of history were missing, not just lost, but deliberately removed. The structure of the data suggested intentional deletion, as if someone had gone through great effort to erase specific events. One fragment mentioned a coordinated memory collapse protocol. Another referred to external intervention after unified conflict. The meaning was unclear, but the tone was serious, urgent, like something had gone very wrong and needed to be hidden. The captain ordered full isolation of the recovered files. No external transmission was allowed until they fully understood what they were dealing with. Meanwhile, another section of the ship began showing signs of partial activity. It was not full power, just faint responses. Doors that should have been sealed began unlocking on their own. Old systems flickered briefly before shutting down again. It was as if the ship was reacting to their presence. The crew followed the signal deeper into the vessel, passing through damaged sections that showed signs of extreme force. Some corridors had been completely torn apart, while others were perfectly preserved, untouched by time. At one point, they entered what appeared to be a data archive chamber. It was massive. Walls were lined with storage units far older than any modern system. Many of them were destroyed, but a few still held intact cores. These cores contained compressed data, waiting silently for activation. The science team carefully extracted one. When it was powered using portable equipment, a partial reconstruction of visuals appeared. It showed fleet movements. Hundreds of ships traveling together across star systems. Massive formations moving with purpose, not chaos. This was not a small exploration mission. This was something on a scale the modern galaxy had never recorded. Then came another disturbing detail. In several visual fragments, unknown fleets appeared opposing them. Not human, not friendly. The recordings did not show who started the conflict, only that it escalated rapidly across multiple systems. There were references to planetary evacuations, system lockdowns, and communication blackouts. And then, suddenly, everything stopped. The final logs in the sequence were incomplete, corrupted, as if someone had cut the record off in the middle of history. The silence that followed was heavier than before, because now it was no longer just a mystery of an abandoned ship. It was a missing chapter of humanity itself, a chapter that someone or something had worked very hard to erase completely from existence. The more data they recovered, the harder it became to accept what they were seeing. At first, the crew had believed they were looking at an old human warship, lost in deep space. But now the story forming inside the corrupted logs pointed to something much larger. something that involved not just one ship, but the entire structure of galactic history. The control room of the ship had become their main base of operations. Portable systems were spread across broken consoles. Light flickered across damaged screens as the team worked carefully to rebuild fragments of ancient data. Every few minutes, new pieces of information appeared, but each one raised more questions than answers. The science officer leaned closer to a recovered sequence and paused for a long moment. The data was not just military records anymore. It contained diplomatic exchanges, strategic communications between multiple civilizations, not just humans. Other species were mentioned clearly. At first, the crew thought it might be a translation error, but the structure of the language was consistent. It described alliances, agreements, and joint operations between multiple advanced civilizations. Humanity was not alone in these records. It was part of something far more complex. And yet, in modern galactic archives, none of this existed. The captain ordered a cross-check with known historical databases from the central network. The results came back almost instantly. There was no record of any such alliance, no war, no cooperation, no contact history matching what they were reading. It was as if this entire section of time had been removed. Deliberately, as they moved deeper into the archive chamber, another layer of truth began to surface. The recovered log started referencing a large-scale conflict that spanned multiple systems. Entire sectors of space were listed as active war zones. But what stood out was not just the scale of the conflict. It was a language used to describe its end. There were repeated mentions of containment decision and historical reset protocol. The phrasing was clinical, almost cold. It did not describe a normal war ending. It described a controlled removal of information. One fragment showed a meeting between unknown representatives. The recording was damaged, but parts of it were still readable. It suggested that multiple civilizations had agreed on a coordinated action, not just to end a war, but to erase it. The crew looked at each other in silence after that discovery. It was difficult to process. The idea that entire events could be removed from history was already unsettling, but the suggestion that multiple civilizations had agreed to do it together made it even more disturbing. The captain ordered all recovered files to be backed up immediately. There was a growing concern that the ship itself might not remain stable for long. The faint power fluctuations earlier were becoming slightly more frequent. Systems that had been dead for thousands of years were reacting in unpredictable ways. Then came the most important discovery so far. A sealed command chamber located near the core of the ship. It was heavily reinforced, far more than any other section. Access panels showed multiple layers of security, all outdated but still active in some form. The crew spent hours carefully bypassing the locks, using both modern tools and recovered ship codes. When the door finally opened, a cold wave of air escaped from inside. The chamber was intact. Unlike the rest of the ship, this room looked almost preserved. The central command seat was still in place, surrounded by advanced control systems. In front of it stood a large holographic interface, now dormant but still structurally stable. The moment they entered, their systems picked up a faint signal. It was not a broadcast. It was a stored message. The science officer activated it carefully. A holographic display flickered to life, showing fragments of a recorded briefing. The image was distorted, but the message was clear enough to understand. It described a final phase of conflict, a coordinated decision by unknown powers to eliminate all records of a certain era of human expansion, not through destruction alone, but through rewriting history itself. The reason, according to the fragmented message, was fear. Fear of what humanity had become during that lost era. The message did not go into detail about the full events, but implied that humanity had reached a level of expansion and influence that threatened the balance of multiple civilizations. Instead of continuing the war, those civilizations chose a different method. They removed the evidence. Entire fleets were destroyed or scattered. Archives were wiped. Planets were isolated and given new historical narratives. Even surviving technology was hidden or buried. And this warship, according to the final fragment, was one of the last vessels to escape the purge. The recording ended abruptly after that. The room fell into silence again. No one spoke for a long time. because the implication was clear. If what they were seeing was true, then everything known about early galactic history was incomplete, not by accident, but by design. And worse, the ship they were standing inside was not just a relic. It was proof that someone had once controlled the past itself. The command chamber felt heavier than any other part of the ship. Even though there was no gravity change, no environmental shift, something about the space made everyone move more slowly. It was as if the room itself carried the weight of everything that had happened here long ago. The holographic system was still active after the last transmission ended. It did not shut down completely. Instead, it stayed in a low loop state, repeating fragments of the message at long intervals. Broken sentences, distorted images, and faint bursts of data kept appearing and fading again. The crew gathered around it, carefully reviewing everything one more time. No one wanted to miss anything, because it was becoming clear that this might be the only intact source of truth from that forgotten era. The captain ordered a final deep scan of the ship's core systems. What came next was unexpected. Instead of showing full system failure, the scan revealed something unusual. A dormant layer of command code was still present beneath all damaged systems. It was not active, but it was waiting. The science officer studied it closely and realized something important. This was not just a warship. It had been designed with a secondary purpose. Even after total collapse, it could still transmit one final signal, a last message preserved through time. The crew hesitated before attempting to activate it. There was no guarantee of safety. No guarantee that the ship would not react in a dangerous way. But the chance to recover complete information was too important to ignore. After a careful sequence of commands, the dormant system responded. Lights across the chamber dimmed for a moment, then stabilized. The holographic display shifted. The fragmented visuals began to align into a more stable form. And then the full message started. It was not a recording of a single event. It was a structured archive of conclusions, like someone had gathered all remaining truth and compressed it into one final report. The message explained that the war had not ended in a traditional sense. There was no clear victory or defeat. Instead, there had been a decision made by multiple civilizations to remove the memory of the conflict entirely. The reason was not simple hatred or destruction. It was fear of repetition. The conflict had grown so large, so complex, that it threatened to continue endlessly. Entire regions of space were collapsing under constant warfare. Even alliances that were meant to bring peace failed repeatedly. So a decision was made, not to end the war, but to erase the conditions that caused it to exist in memory. That meant rewriting history itself. The message showed images of coordinated efforts, massive data cleansing operations, fleet withdrawals, controlled destruction of archives, and carefully managed reconstruction of historical records. It was not chaos. It was organized silence. Humanity, according to the final logs, had once been a central force in that era, not as a victim and not as a conqueror alone, but as a major participant whose actions influenced the entire structure of galactic events. When the decision for erasure was made, humanity was also included in the removal process. Not physically destroyed, but removed from recorded history. The warship they were standing inside was one of the few surviving exceptions. It had escaped the final phase of the reset operation, carrying incomplete but real evidence of what had once existed. As the message ended, the hologram displayed one final line. It was not a warning, not a command, just a statement. The past is never fully gone. It only waits to be found again. After that, the system powered down completely. This time, it did not restart. The ship became silent once more. The crew stood still, processing everything they had learned. No one tried to speak at first. The weight of the discovery made words feel unnecessary, because what they had uncovered was not just a forgotten warship. It was proof that history itself could be edited. And somewhere beyond the edges of known space, other systems might still remember what had been erased. The captain finally gave the order to leave the ship, not because the mission was complete, but because it was too dangerous to stay any longer. They had recovered what they came for, or at least what they were allowed to find. As the shuttle detached and slowly moved away, the ancient warship remained in the darkness, silent again. But this time, it no longer felt empty. It felt like something had awakened, not inside the ship, but outside it, far beyond the reach of their sensors. A faint, unfamiliar signal began to echo through deep space networks that had not been used in thousands of years. A response was coming, and the galaxy, once silent about its past, might not stay silent for much longer.